Hi, my name is Mike Gillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Welcome back, Destiny Forgers. Mike Dillard here, and before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that we have just unveiled the brand new selfmademan.com website, and I think it turned out pretty amazing. This is an investment that I made to really elevate the quality of our online presence so that it matches the quality of the show. So if you haven't seen it yet, head over to selfmademan.com and let me know what you think in the comments below today's episode. With that being said, mistakes do happen, and unfortunately, this is the second but final episode that I recorded last week without the proper microphone working, so the sound of my voice is going to be less than par, but our guest is going to be coming through loud and clear, so my apologies for that. And speaking of guests, today we're going to dive into one of the single biggest challenges that you're going to face as an entrepreneur, which is the ability to get out of your own way as your business starts to grow. In the beginning, you're doing almost everything in your business because you simply don't have any other choice. I've been there and done that a dozen different times. But as you start to gain traction and as you start to grow, you're going to reach a critical inflection point where you must hire and start to delegate more and more tasks to other people. You've got to transition from a business operator who is working in the business to a business owner who is working on the business, or you will eventually burn out and your business will collapse under the weight of its own success. So to help you make this transition successfully, I've invited my friend Tim Francis to join us here on today's show. And about 5 years ago, back in 2010, Tim was blindsided by a rare illness called Erythema Nodosum, which almost killed him and left him unable to walk or leave the bed for 3 months. He nearly went bankrupt and was forced to start over in his business venture from scratch. So at that point in time, he promised himself that I'm never going to burn out as an entrepreneur again. I'm never going to put my health at risk. And that really created a huge driving motivation in him, which moved him forward to start his current venture, which is called ProfitFactory.com. And their entire goal is to help entrepreneurs transition from business operator to business owner, helping them successfully arrange and then delegate to a production team around them. Tim definitely brings a much needed structure and organizational processes to growing companies that are often missing. I know they have been in mine in the past. And so today we're going to dive into the very first person that most of you will hire in order to free up more of your time in order to start down this path of delegation, which is a personal assistant. Tim breaks this process down into a very scientific process to really ensure that you find an assistant who can not only fill your weak spots, but who is also compatible with your strengths and personality type so that you guys have this flow together and you work beautifully together. This is some extremely valuable information, so please help me welcome Tim Francis from Profit Factory. All right, welcome back, everybody. Mike Dillard here, and we've got an episode and a guest that is going to be extremely, extremely useful for those of you out there who are entrepreneurs currently with a business that is growing. And we're going to be talking with my friend Tim Francis from Canada, who's down here in Austin this week. We had a chance to have lunch yesterday, and I couldn't let him leave without doing a podcast for you guys, because he has a very unique skill set on really how to scale your business. And we're going to start at the ground floor here today, specifically talking about the very first hire every entrepreneur should make in order to give themselves more time, more productivity, and more leverage. And that is a personal assistant. So, Tim, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, Tim and I met at the Baby Bathwater Institute in Eden, Utah, a couple of months ago up on Summit Mountain, which was awesome. And we had a great time getting to know each other, a great exchange of value, if you will. I had a lot of advice for Tim, and he had a lot of advice for me, specifically on an area that I've been very weak in, which is scaling businesses. I've never had an assistant throughout my entire entrepreneurial career, which most people, including Tim, would call crazy. I don't know how to hire one. I don't know what to look for. And it's one of the things that I'm going to have to tackle here in the coming months, and that every entrepreneur really is going to have to tackle as your business starts to grow and starts to scale. So really excited to have you here on the Tim Show to address a very common issue that every entrepreneur will face. And you've got some fantastic advice around this topic. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, you bet. It's one of those things that you don't realize that how badly you need it until it's probably like 2 years too late or longer. I was speaking with Ryan Levesque a few days ago, and he said, you know what, man, I wish I would have, first of all, just generally built his team sooner. And he says one of his greatest mistakes was that. And then he also said specifically having an executive assistant, and some people might like to think of it as a personal assistant or a virtual assistant in some cases. They can be local as well. And maybe don't fully realize, first of all, just how easy it is to get one. Secondly, is how inexpensive it can be. And thirdly, just how deeply an assistant can help you to help you really focus on the highest value tasks you can get leverage in your day.
Exactly. So before we dive into that, I would love it if you would really walk us through your story and how you really acquire this particular skill set when it comes to growing and scaling companies. You've helped Ryan Levesque quite a bit when it comes to him building his team. And so how did you get down this path? And then let's dive into the specifics of the assistant later in the show.
You bet. So a handful of years ago, I think it was 2007 or so, I was on top of the world. I was a touring rock drummer, and I was also an entrepreneur at that point. And there was really a constellation of issues that quickly popped up quickly. Because I was wearing the dual hats of entrepreneur by day and drummer in his band by night, I was working 70 to 80 hour work weeks, week in, week out, and starting to get, fairly tired. And I think probably most entrepreneurs can identify with that. And then there was this real constellation of issues that came up. First of all, my band, it was an honor. We were asked to play at the Western Canadian Music Awards. So that was very exciting, except one minor problem. 20 minutes before the show, we broke up. It's kind of like, damn bands, just yet another crazy band story. So that was fairly heartbreaking after 6 years of being together and a couple hundred shows, and we even had sponsors and airplay. It was, I thought we were going somewhere. I was also promoting a speaker around Western Canada, and he ended up being a part of a somewhat questionable pseudo Ponzi scheme, which was completely blindsided me. I didn't see it coming. I thought he was my messiah. I thought he was going to be the person who would teach me how to be just this incredible entrepreneur. And I put all my chips into him in a business sense, and that went away. And then thirdly, as probably many entrepreneurs on this call, and Mike, I know that you and I have had a bit of a heart-to-heart about this, is the real estate market suddenly dove. And me personally, I was very young and naive and thought it would always go up. And I lost around $100,000 in that. And so all of that happened in a space of probably about 18 months on top of working the super long hours. And I actually developed an illness. The illness is called Erythema Nodosum. If you've never heard of it, I don't blame you. My doctor, who's been my doctor actually for over 30 years, I've had the same doctor. I've been lucky that way. She's had it 3 times in her career. So very rare, as in she's seen it 3 times in her career. And what it is my ankles and knees and hips really started to swell uncontrollably on December 26, 2010. I'll always remember it, right after Christmas. And by New Year's, it had spread through my body and things had swollen so much I couldn't even walk anymore. So for 3 months, there was nothing we could do. There was no surgery. There was no specific drugs to take. It's literally, you just wait. And so I had a lot of time to think because I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand. And also because it was in my elbows, I couldn't type. I couldn't even use a mouse. And so I had to move back in with my parents full time, get full-time care. And I had a moment where, I'm not a religious person, but I am spiritual. And I almost feel like I met a higher power. And the higher power asked me if I wanted to continue on my entrepreneurial journey or not. And I think most people would give me every reason to say, "Hey, Tim, you're like, for all intents and purposes, you're crippled like a 95-year-old." I had every reason to quit. And yet this little voice inside me said, "No, like, I want to continue." And in that moment, I really realized that my entrepreneurial journey was not about making $1 bajillion or becoming super famous like I thought I was going to be rich and famous in my band days. It was really about the process. And it was in that moment where I went from being a drinking the Kool-Aid, get rich tomorrow guy, and realized that I wanted to be a craftsman. And so along the way, I started, as I was laying in bed, I made 2 promises. One was that I would never be a burnout entrepreneur again. And second was I'd never take my mobility for granted again. So here we are a handful of years later. I've done over 600 CrossFit workouts, which is I'm very proud of. And I look back how that moment, as much as it was such an incredibly low moment, it was actually a trigger point for me to learn how to do business differently. And so I started reading tons of books on, leverage and systems, hiring, management. In the years since then, I took Sam Carpenter's Work the System course, which is incredibly helpful. I went out and actually became Scrum certified in the project management method. I also took the Colby certification, became worldwide certified as a Colby consultant. And as I was rebuilding my business, I started putting these things in play. And as soon as I hired Sarah, who to this day is my executive assistant, my revenue went up by 50% in just a matter of about 14 weeks. Now, I didn't have like a $3 million company that went to 4.5 or anything. It was a 6-figure company, but it was absolutely thrilling to see those breakthroughs. And earlier this year, we're now in 2015, I've now twice gone away for 8 straight days, in one instance to Hawaii and 10 days in the other to Jamaica. And I didn't have to check my email once, no project management software updates, no emergency text messages, nothing. I've actually been able to take a true vacation. And a big part of that is because I now have an executive assistant who can take care of things and run things while I'm away. And what's even nicer, Mike, is when I come back, I don't get the welcome home avalanche of 500 to 1,000 emails like I used to. Because I've got this assistant who's still running the business while I'm away, I get to come home to just a regular 20, 25 emails, usually half an hour to an hour of work, and carry on. So that's my path. And like Ryan Levesque mentioned, and like I've heard other entrepreneurs say, we all wish we would have gotten an executive assistant way sooner. As soon as it clicks as far as what they can do for you, it's like you can never go back.
So, Lito, let's dive into this process. I've looked at hiring an assistant in the past, but for me, a lot of the time, I just don't have enough to keep them busy. And then if you're not challenging anyone on your team specifically, we can talk about that too. But when it comes to hiring an A player, if you're not challenging them enough, they get bored and they leave. And so I didn't ever feel like I had enough that I could put on an A player's plate and challenge them enough to keep them busy full time and happy and all of that good stuff. So I've never bothered with a virtual assistant, which is part time, because I would want someone here who's local that can, run errands or, help me put on events, handle grocery shopping, things like that. And so how do I reconcile that if you're in a similar position? Because I have a feeling that for new entrepreneurs specifically, who this might be their very first hire, it's just them and this would be their first hire, they're probably going to run into the same issue.
Yeah. So I think that it's partially the question of how do I give them enough work? And the other side of that equation is how much do they want to work? So for me, I ended up hiring somebody virtual. And because they're actually a stay-at-home mom, they didn't want to work 40 hours a week. They only wanted to work, we actually started with just 5 hours a week in the very beginning. And since then, we've grown together to the point where Sarah's now working for me I think it's about 25 to 30 hours a week. So that's the first part of the equation, is how much do they want to work? Then from there, over time, the very first task I handed over to Sarah was how to upload podcast episodes to Libsyn, a podcasting service. And then after that, it got into uploading YouTube videos. And after that, then piece by piece, she was just taking one task off my plate at one after the other. And now, my goodness, she handles all the WordPress website updates. She does almost everything in Infusionsoft. She'll even build out campaigns in Campaign Builder and Infusionsoft. She's able to pull reports from AdWords and analytics if I need them. She's able to help book travel for me. She's able to also take care of even a few personal events for me. So I have dinner parties at my house from time to time, and it's with business friends, and so she'll help coordinate, and that's a whole interesting set of tasks because you got to give people a map, and you need to ask them if they have allergies and coordinate groceries to pick up. I'm amazed that, Mike, that you feel that you couldn't find enough things, because for me it's just like it just became so obvious so quickly. So perhaps we just run our business differently, and maybe I need to learn something from you. I just
well,
am totally amazed.
Now that I think about it too, I got to admit there's a personal side to this. When it's come to anybody that's really been on my team in the past, is I really come from a place of service. Just generally, I have come from that my entire life. And I feel conflicted when I ask other people to do things for me. Because I feel like I'm burdening them with things, especially if I can do them for myself.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And that has been something that as you're sitting here talking and I'm really thinking about it, like, okay, what's the issue here? That is obviously a big piece of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So obviously that's something I need to get over. But all right. So other than my personal, neuroses of some kind that I need to deal with on that, what would be the process that you would walk myself through, and everybody else listening? All right, Tim, I need to get an assistant. How do we do this?
Yeah. So before we go there, I mean, I'm kind of touched that that you're sharing yourself so authentically. So that's beautiful, Mike. And can I just address that for a quick sec before we get to the tactics? Yeah. Okay. It blew me away the first time I got a text message from Sarah, and it was a picture of her playing in the backyard of her house with her daughter and her son. And she said, "Tim, this is why I work for you." And I saw that, and it hit me. And almost as fast as I realized it, she said, "Tim, the reason I help you build your dream is because you help me build mine." And like, I'm getting a little stumbly here almost, because it's like when you realize that giving someone the opportunity to take some work off your plate is actually fulfilling some of their highest dreams and goals, suddenly it's like this incredible sense of service comes from that. If Sarah wasn't working for me, I mean, maybe she'd find somebody else to work with virtually. The other option, though, was for her to go back to being to work in a law office where she would have to spend a whole bunch of money on getting a wardrobe, keeping her wardrobe current as a business professional type setting. She'd have to spend a whole bunch of money on childcare and vehicle expenses to drive in, and she would have to be away from her kids. Like the Kodak moments of life are every single day for her right now. And that's priceless. Like, forget the cost of gas to drive into town. It's like priceless that she gets to be with her kids. I mean, real soon here, her kids are going to want to be with their friends more than they're going to want to be with her. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes for kids when they become teenagers and whatnot. So right now, it's like every moment she gets is worth like 100 that she could do anything else. So, and I think this is a really, really, this is a softer side of it, but such an important part of what shifted in my mind is I used to think of a virtual assistant as some adding machine over in India who is there just to be slave labor and to do all the stuff I don't want to do. When in fact, I realized, well, hold on. 100% of the work that needs to be done is important. It's not BS work. It's important work. It's just no longer appropriate for me to be doing it anymore because I'm able to do work at the time when I first hired Sarah at $40 an hour. And since I've been so freed up and a handful of other decisions, I've now been able to increase my rates to $500 an hour, and people are excited to pay that. So it's just not appropriate for me to be doing those tasks anymore. But it is important that credit cards get processed and websites get updated. And if I can create an opportunity for Sarah to come in, a real live human being, I've talked to her kids, we've met up in Chicago, we've gone to a Chicago Blackhawks NHL game, her husband came along, we had a great time. Like, there's this incredible connection that's there. And when all of those gears flipped in my brain from being like, oh, well, this is just a 4-hour work week, just go hire a bunch of cheap labor overseas. Like, when that stopped in my brain and I started realizing this is a human being that's an asset, me to them and them to me, and every week that goes by, we get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Suddenly, it became an investment into Sarah and Sarah into me. And without each other, we wouldn't be able to build our respective dreams. So I think that was a huge moment for me. And I don't know, Mike, if for you that kind of changes your perspective a bit.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think it's just going to depend on the person, but that is a great point. And yeah, I totally get it. So how do we bring this to life? How do you go about hiring a fantastic assistant for yourself?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is to know yourself. And as maybe vague as that sounds, I'll say specifically what I'm talking about is your working instinct. Without getting into a full course on the human mind and personalities and motivation and whatnot, I'm a huge proponent of the Colby Score. And so the first thing that I would do is I would go get my Colby Score done. If you understand yourself and your working instinct, then you know what you need in an assistant. So you can go get your Colby Score done in a bunch of different places. One is from Colby.com, which is the main website. You can also get it done from profitfactory.com/Colby. And if you do that, then you end up in my consultant back office. And at that point, I'd be able to pull it up if you needed some extra support. So I got my Colby Score done. I'm a 7635.
And this is the Colby A index, correct?
Yeah, that's the one, Colby A index. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So I'm a 7635. So when you get your test done, you'll know what your score, you'll know what that means. And really, a very short explanation is that Colby is not a personality test. It doesn't really talk about your dreams, desires, motivation, or personality. That would be something like Myers-Briggs. Nor is it an IQ test, like a cognitive test. It's your working instinct, which is a third completely separate part of the mind. So usually in our assistant, we want them to be follow through 6 or higher. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so one of the parts of the process, which I'll mention you'll hear coming up here, is actually having your assistant do their Colby Score as well. So step 1 is the Colby Score. Do you have any questions about that, or should I keep rolling?
Let's share with people why that's important and why it's important that your prospective hire have their Colby Score and why you have your Colby Score.
Sure. So when I think about my Colby Score versus Mike's Colby Score, we solve our problems differently and achieve our goals differently. I'm a 7635, and what that means is I will go and get a whole bunch of information and create a strategic plan first. That's my 7 and my 6. And I also am someone who doesn't like to change directions too quickly. That's my 3. Whereas Mike is someone who's 5484. We're giving away secrets here, Mike, to your audience as to how you accomplish things.
No, please. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So 5484 means Mike's first instinct is going to go to try things. Mike is very willing to change directions when he sees an opportunity. His tolerance for risk is going to be higher than mine is, which means he's able to take advantage of opportunities that I might be too slow to act on.
Very quick to take action.
Very quick to take action, yeah. And at the same time, I might be a little more cautious, which also has its advantages in its own way. So Mike will start with taking action, and his 5484 is so much higher in action that Mike has actually 1 initiating mode, whereas I have 2. So Mike will then, after that, go to getting information in his 5, which is Fact Finder. And so Mike will probably try a bunch of things, see, and then after that, go and see how it went. And then after that, just try it, and then after that, see how it went and adjust course along the way. Mike's kind of like the ready, fire, aim person, whereas I'm like the ready, aim, fire kind of person. So it's almost telling that I would have a company, a consulting company that is here to support entrepreneurs to get their, systems and all the mechanical parts all sorted up. I'm not one to come up with the idea. My clients, other entrepreneurs, they get their great idea, they build it up to a certain point, and then I come in and I piggyback off that, whereas Mike's the one who will come up with the big idea in the beginning. And it's probably, I would say, about 65, 70% of entrepreneurs that I speak with are like Mike in that they've got that high quick start. So
yeah, we'll jump in with 2 feet, figure it out as we go.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Screw the details. We'll figure that out later.
Right, right, totally. So now, as far as the assistant is concerned, is oftentimes the assistant is coming in, and if you're like Mike, if you're like a typical entrepreneur, you probably have a messy Dropbox account. You probably are not real excited to handle some of the details. And if we can get an assistant who is at least a 6 in follow through, which is the blue bar in Colby, if a person knows their own Colby score, then that means that the assistant is going to be instinctively closer to me, somebody who likes to set up structure and systems and make sure that things get babysat and carried across the finish line. So now, why it's so important to know your own Colby score? Obviously, there's an infinite number of ways it's helpful. As far as hiring an assistant, if you have someone who is lower in follow through than you are, so I'm a 6, and if my assistant were a 5, I would instinctively create structure and follow rules and systems more than my assistant, in which case I would be cleaning up after the assistant. And that would defeat the purpose of having the assistant in the first place. I want to be able to act as the entrepreneur and have the assistant almost act kind of like a cleanup crew behind me to make sure the documents get filed properly in Dropbox. And after I create the podcast episode, I don't do that anymore, but whatever the case may be, then the assistant can come along and be the one to make sure that it gets uploaded properly to Libsyn or YouTube or whatnot, and make sure that all the details get hit. I also want an assistant that's going to be fairly high in fact finder and probably the same or higher than me, so that they can capture all the fine details to make sure that things like my appointments get scheduled accurately, that the right time zone gets mentioned all the time, the agendas get included in my calendar, et cetera, et cetera. So my assistant is actually a 7733, and so she meets me at the same level in fact finder. She's slightly higher than me by 1 in follow through, and she's also low in quick start, which is great because I am too, and she's able to meet me at that level. So, Mike, with you as an 8 in quick start, I would probably say ideally you would have an assistant who's probably a mid-range.
I was going to say a 5, someone that's accommodative.
Totally.
Yeah. If you get someone who's too low on quick start, we'll have huge conflicts because I'll be like, "Come on, let's go, let's get it done." Now let's and then they're still mired in the muck of trying to get the information and the details they need, to get started, essentially, and that doesn't work either.
Yeah, and likewise, the difference in quick start specifically is you would say, "Oh, hey, you know what? We're changing the plan. I know yesterday I told you we were going to go this direction, but today I had this opportunity. Let's go a different direction." And if somebody is a 3 in quick start and they're more slow, they're like a battleship turning a corner where it's like a long, slow arc, whereas you're a jet boat zigging, zagging, then that assistant will just burn out. They'll go against the grain. My brother was a chief of staff for one of the major government ministries for a handful of years up here in Canada, specifically in Alberta. And in a lot of ways, he was supporting the minister in his job, which is kind of like your in the United States, you call it the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of Health. So in Canada, it's the Minister of. So this isn't a church thing; it's a government leadership thing. And my brother was forced to literally, like, how fast politics moves. At one, be moving one direction today, and something happens, like an oil tanker spills, or there's like the price of oil changes overnight, and there's this big chaos. And he had to be ready to zigzag all the time. He's a 9 in quick start, so that was perfect for him to be in his chief of staff / supporting role, and to be a 9 because that's what the job required. So there's no one score that is perfect for all assistance and supporting type people. It depends on the job, on the specific situation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I've got my Colby Score. I've got I've got the test that I'm going to have my prospective candidates take as well to get their score.
Yep.
Where do I start looking for assistance? Do I go to Monster? Do I go to Odesk? Do I go to Craigslist? LinkedIn?
Right. So the first question we actually have to ask is, do you want to go local or virtual? If you're going to go virtual for your executive assistant, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you stay in North America if you're a North American entrepreneur. I have hired over the last 7 years or so assistants and contractors from probably every corner of the globe except for Antarctica. And I've tried vWorker and Elance, and I guess at one point it was called Odesk before it became vWorker. I believe that's the genesis. I've tried onlinejobs.ph. I've tried talking to people that I work out with. I've tried literally, maybe not everything, but pretty darn close to it. And what I discovered was someone in Canada or US is worth the premium that you pay for it for probably 5 or 6 reasons. The first is that they're in the similar or same time zone as you. And if you have your EA or VA doing things for you that require phone calls, so for example, if I'm hosting a dinner party, then she or he's going to need to call my friends, and if she can't be calling at like 3 a.m. So that's fairly self-evident. Secondly, excellent English, both written and spoken. And I can't emphasize again just how important that is, especially as an executive assistant, that they can pick things up very quickly and that they can also represent you. If they're going to handle your email inbox, which I highly, highly recommend, then they need to be able to a native English speaker. They also, as maybe crazy as it sounds, is they need to have reliable electricity and internet. I had an experience in India, as in with a VA from India, where suddenly she just disappeared. And I think it was for like 7 days or something. And I mean, literally like no notice, just one day she just wasn't there anymore. And I started to wonder if she got sick or kidnapped or if she quit and just wasn't happy. Like I had no idea. It was the worst feeling. And she suddenly came back 7 days later in this just mess, or she's like so apologetic. I'm so sorry. I wasn't able to contact you because I guess there was some government corruption and one political leader was mad at the other political leader. And so he had the electricity turned off to the neighborhood that my assistant lives in. And so there's nothing she could do about it. It was just the country she lived in, the neighborhood she lived in, and the corruption that was there, that she got wiped out from being a VA for an entire week. I cannot have that from someone who's my executive or personal assistant, because there's too much depends on me being a great, in a great teammate situation. So Canada and US, so far it looks like things are stable and we're not going to have some political craziness that's going to rob the electricity and the internet from our assistant. Another reason is same culture. I tried working with VAs from the Philippines, nicest people on the planet. In fact, probably to a fault. They were actually so terrified of offending me that they would shut down if I ever asked for feedback, or if something went wrong. It was like, I mean, when things go wrong, yeah, it sucks, but it's also just a priceless learning opportunity. And they were just too terrified to even be honest about what could be done better. Mm. Right. So that was a problem. So, and then in India, I'm sure it's not like this across all of India. My Canadian friend who's Indian time once joked, "Oh, ha, 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 there's something called Indian time." And I didn't know what that was. And basically he was telling me that I guess in East Indian culture, it's just the attention to punctuality and time just isn't what it is in Canada and the US in Western culture. And let me tell you, when he put that term on it, it really made a lot of sense why a lot of the projects that I was getting done in India and even Pakistan, it's like they would promise the world just to get the job, and it would, without fail, come in like 50% late, 100% late. And it maybe I just got bad luck, and like I'm Canadian, I don't offend anyone. It just seemed to happen every time I worked with people in the Middle East. So, and like in India as well. So I was just like, working with Sarah and the other assistants I've now worked with here in the United States and Canada, and all the assistants I've hired for my clients in Canada and the US, it's like I never hear any problems around punctuality. So that's another one of the reasons. So I think local, as in Canada or US, is non-negotiable per se. Once we understand we want to go Canada or US, the next question is, do we go local or virtual? And so if you feel that you have a lot of need for literally like in-person services, and that is quite high, like you need, like it's quite like you need them to come to your house and staple booklets, you need them to pick up groceries, you need them to be like an in-town concierge, then local probably makes more sense. Now, before you say, oh, well, that's me because I have some in-person stuff to do, understand that, like in my case, Sarah actually manages local concierge people in my city. So she's in Indiana, United States of America. I'm in Alberta, Canada. And so from a time zone away and thousands of miles apart, she's actually getting a concierge service to pick up things and deliver it to my house. She's actually the one who's arranging my haircuts and dinner parties. And so as crazy as it sounds, someone from thousands of miles away is able to run all the local stuff for me. If I need printing done, she takes care of that and gets the concierge to pick it up and or gets it shipped straight to my house. So there's actually very, very few things that I actually need Sarah to be in town for, because when I really break it down and think about it, hey, there's specialists that run errands, get groceries and whatnot, probably better than she would if it was just one of the many tasks that she does. So now that being said, I get it. Sometimes we just really need a local person, in which case I would probably go Craigslist. I would also consider going to the house list of your business to see if there's a raving fan inside your company. If you're going to go virtual, the best place I've ever found, and this is going to sound funny, to get a virtual assistant is a place called hiremymom.com. And no, that is not a porn site.
Interesting. I haven't heard of that. So I assume that's, that's what that is for specifically. Stay-at-home moms who are, looking to do assistant-esque work.
Yeah, and I almost kind of backed in by accident and discovered it almost by accident. Well, it was basically by accident. One night I don't remember what I was searching, but I came across a video clip of this whole new generation of moms working from home, and I clicked on the video clip, and it was this, I think it was like Fox News or ABC News, and this Leslie Pyle woman was speaking, and she was the owner of hiremymom.com. I said, what the heck's that? So I went and checked it out, and what I so totally, there's a handful of reasons why I specifically love Hire My Mom. One, it's all moms from Canada and the US. So it hits our qualification of needing them to be North American. Secondly, I mean, the first time that I threw an application up on Hire My Mom, Mike, I was blown away with the kind of applications that I got. We're talking like a couple people had like their MBA. One was like a PhD in like astrophysics or something. I was getting people who'd been assistants to like attorneys. I was getting people like Sarah was a paralegal. So it was just like when I was conditioned to believe virtual help was all $5 an hour people who didn't know how to be on time, couldn't speak English, didn't know the culture. And it was just like, to go from that to being like, oh my goodness, I'm getting somebody who maybe was in like a Fortune 100 company working as an assistant to a middle manager or has their MBA. It was just like, I felt like I hit the jackpot. It was absolutely like, I almost had to look 2-3 times to make sure that like it wasn't a mirage. So that's the second reason, is because they come pre-built as being like corporate America or professional America, skilled with Microsoft Word and Excel. And, you don't have to teach them all this. They come pre-built with all the business culture type finesse. So, that, and then furthermore, because they're moms, their number one priority is to be at home. Like they're literally called hiremymom.com because it's all moms who specifically want to work from home. And because they want to work from home, there's a few built-in things that you learn very quickly. So number one is they're not going to grind you for the highest possible salary because their top priority isn't money. The top priority is job flexibility, to be able to work from home. And oftentimes, if you can be a little bit flexible what hours they work so that they can be with their kids for feeding time, or they can be with their kids to run them to school, or whatever the situation is, if you can be a little flexible on the time that they do the work and they can do it from home, it is like you've given them paradise.
Yeah,
so,
no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So powerful, right?
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to shoot you some rapid fires here.
Yep.
If you don't mind.
Yep.
Speaking of pay, what would be a good starting range? And are you typically going to be hiring, someone hourly, maybe to start with and test the waters? Or are you going to offer them a salary?
So I'll answer your question and one of the next ones you're going to have. And so it's like, how much do I pay them? And the other question I get all the time is, well, I don't make enough money in my business, or, I'm not ready to commit to a full-time, like $70,000 a year salary. What do I do? So I'll bundle both of those to get those questions together to say, I've paid Sarah at least $15 an hour since the beginning. So $15 per hour. It's higher than what Sarah might get paid starting at other companies where they might get paid like $10, $12 an hour. And I'm happy about that because it's just enough higher that it sets me apart. Secondly, I started with Sarah 5 hours a week. Over the course of a month, that's only $300 a month. So it's not some multi-$1,000, $70,000 a year type situation. You can start small. And particularly if you get an assistant who isn't looking to build their own virtual business of assistant work, if they're just looking for a client, and oftentimes if they have a husband who's the primary income earner, they're okay with starting at 5 hours a week for the first month or two, and then from there grow into being more 10, 15, 20 hours a week.
Perfect. And are you bringing this person on as a 1099 contractor, or are you hiring them as an employee?
Sarah is a contractor to me.
That'd be great. That would be the smartest route to take. That I would recommend for everybody else as well. And are you having them sign any kind of paperwork on the onboarding process, such as a non-disclosure? Because this person's obviously going to have access, potentially to your email accounts and whatever else they may be doing for you, paying your bills, whatever it may be, things like that.
So I'll combine that with, again, more questions that are bound to come up. Tim, do you give her access to your credit card? Tim, I'm not too happy about giving up my email inbox. Tim, what if I get ripped off, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it's a growth process for you and for them. So if you're not cool with the email inbox, don't give it to them in the beginning. I didn't give my inbox over to Sarah in the beginning because I didn't think it was possible. She started with uploading stuff to podcast services. That's it. So I didn't need a full-blown confidentiality agreement or non-disclosure, non-compete or anything like that. As our relationship grew, yes, it started becoming an issue. Like when I gave Sarah access to Infusionsoft, now that's all sensitive customer data, and I'm actually probably somewhere violating my terms of service if I don't have properly accredited people that I fully trust in my account. And I know with my merchant account processor that how we handle customer credit card data is extremely sensitive. So I've had to get her to sign both a confidentiality agreement and a statement that she's not going to be writing down credit card numbers on a piece of paper as she's talking to customers and leave them like sitting around on the desk. So by necessity, as we've grown together, yes, I have had to get some of those put in place, as well as do a state police check, which is another nice thing about having a Canadian or American VA is those authorities are in place to do those kinds of background checks.
Okay, awesome, Tim. So super, super great advice. And clearly this is a process. It's not something we can just wrap up here in 20, 25 minutes. So where should people go if they want to continue down this path? Either hiring an assistant with your help and expertise, if you will, or your guidance. And what else do you and your company do for entrepreneurs when it comes to helping them build and scale out their teams?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're curious to know more about the process of getting an assistant or virtual assistant or personal assistant, head over to profitfactory.com/self-made-man, all one word, no hyphens, all lowercase. Again, that's profitfactory.com/self-made-man, all one word, all lowercase, no hyphens, no punctuation. And I've put together a PDF that has a few resources together that will help you to kick off your journey to getting your own executive assistant. As far as if a person wants support and help, we do have a course in development that's coming down the pipe. That's actually it's an online course that a person can take to get the full story and the full guidance on how to get an executive assistant. And as far as the wider angle of like, okay, Tim, so what does profitfactory.com in general do? Do you just hire VAs? Not at all. We're far wider than that. So we help companies to streamline and scale. Oftentimes, founders of companies are great at starting things, and then they get to a certain point, what Mike affectionately shared with me, known as the stupid human trick ceiling, where you can be a really good speaker or a really good marketer, and you get to a certain point where suddenly you can't, it gets real messy behind the scenes and you just can't grow anymore because of all this disorganization behind the scenes. You got a messy Dropbox account. Things are falling through the cracks. You've got late accounts receivable. You've got an overflowing inbox. And that's where I would come in to help you set up the systems, the project management, hire some team members so that you build what internally we call the engine room, allowing the engine room to take over a ton of the frontline tasks and a lot of the production so that you as an entrepreneur can extract from all of that chaos and spend your time back being the visionary and to help support the entrepreneur so they get the management skills so that they can continue to grow and get past that plateau that all entrepreneurs hit. We've helped Ryan Levesque, is one of the more well-known clients we've helped, and we've helped both on-site and virtually clients both in Canada and the US.
So where would be the best place for people to go to dive into this and to learn more about you guys?
I would head over to profitfactory.com and check out the Engine Room Blueprint, and that would give people a very quick overview, like under 10 minutes, on what the Engine Room looks like.
Awesome. Well, Tim, thank you so much for jumping on the show today and sharing your time and your expertise on what is a very, very important topic. And guys, go check out profitfactory.com. Information's awesome. I got to see Tim's presentation a few months ago, which is how we ended up on this show here together, because I wanted to introduce him to you guys and the value that he can provide to you. So once again, Tim, thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week.